It's almost that time of year again, folks. April is approaching. The month known for practical jokes and some of the more ridiculous premises concerning the franchise that we all know and, sometimes love. On the other hand, rather than disseminating false information that has become stale over time, we instead prefer to focus on the more lighthearted and silly aspects of joking around with this particular series. We would like to go back to the very fundamentals of what Dragon Ball was in the first place. It wasn't always to do with ki blasts, space, and, screaming. You see, most fans tend to overlook the fact that Dragon Ball is, at its core, an action comedy, and that a significant portion of the series can be summed up as follows. Carrot and Vegetable are both screaming and making a lot of noise. Oh, and one of them is the parent of a child named Trunks. That's pretty much it for most folk, despite the fact it can be occasionally a little childish or even, dare we say, a bit, problematic and dated. The comedy does remain a key component of the series. Yes, I am very much aware that some of the comedic elements are starting to become a little bit icky in the eyes of some outsiders who don't realise that this series was made at least 40 years ago, and that context should be employed. But this is not to say that serious things cannot be done in Dragon Ball. After all, many instances of the original Dragon Ball series were quite stoic and serious for the sake of drama and intrigue when it needed to be. If you had comedy all the time, you would have just had Toriyama's previous entry but martial arts, Dr. Slump, and I don't think that would have been a global icon like Dragon Ball would have been. And despite the modern day perception of the franchise, comedy does remain the main focus. As a result, we decided to cast our eyes to the most recent era of the show, the Super era, to discuss some of the most hilarious parts of the series. And I understand that we have been dogging on it a little bit lately, what they've been doing with the manga, but honestly, there are quite a few things in that series that made us laugh or just simply smile. In our minds, we felt that some of Super's best bits were when it just relaxed a little bit and allowed itself to breathe, explore more of the characters and how they would interact with one another instead of just having fights all of the time. I think it's actually quite healthy for us all, because remember the Broly movie? How we got 40 solid minutes of fighting? Surely that would have been our dreams, right? But actually, one of the biggest critiques about that film from the audience was to do with the level of fatigue had during that middle fight sequence. We all needed room to breathe, so good pacing and mixing of comedy and action makes for the perfect experience. First of all, Hercule versus Beerus and what happened next? Ah yes, episode 15. To be honest, our encounters with Hercule over the years and his subsequent antics have been a bit of a mixed bag for us, with sometimes them being increasingly grating. However, we cannot deny that underneath all of his blustering and showmanship, Hercule is a good guy who has the best interests of those he cares about at heart. He just has to exhibit such sentiments in an over-the-top fashion, which gets on some people's wick. The primary reason for this feeling is that he is able to avoid much of the karmic justice associated with his dishonesty and slightly hypocritical nature. In short, he gets away with his deceit all of the time, as well as his showboating, with some very well-timed quips, quickly thought of excuses, hastily put together reasoning for why he thinks that way, all portrayed in a dramatic manner to which the people of Earth simply lap up because they don't know any better. And they have very, very short memories. I wonder what might have happened if he wound up the King of Earth. Link up top. So naturally, in Super, he goes above and beyond to make amends for the Dragon Team, who do not want to be publicly identified as heroes because it gets a little bit complicated, and also because he's realized that he's now family with Goku and friends, and that family is not the group in which to be dishonest in. And as a result, he does grow in popularity as a member of the larger family. The fact that the Snackians, those blue dog people completely unrelated to King Furry, yeah right, came knocking on his door, wanting to challenge this legendary hero based around the rumors of Boo, I mean, why not? After all, based on what had been communicated throughout the entire universe regarding that pig blob genie, Hercule was the one to unify the people of Earth to stop Majin Buu and allow Earth's heroes to rise to the occasion. This would then go on to make a truly hilarious sequence. Hercule's story, you see, is not only hilarious because we get to see him in his Super Saiyan form, but it's also refreshing to see him finally facing the consequences of his lies, that he actually has got to deal with all of the hyperbole that he has been spouting and exhibiting over the years, and Majin Buu isn't there to help him. He never really had to justify his thoughts. I mean, he could just think of a reason to dodge the question, and whenever he had to do anything remotely similar to actually challenging his authority, like with Android 18 and the championship, he could just pay them off and keep his prestige intact. I mean, she didn't care, she got money. Android 18 is working smart, not hard. Goku has clearly arrived to save the day, of course, because, it's Dragon Ball. However, Chi-Chi will soon arrive to warn him that he is in grave danger for shirking his work, and to be honest, the entire tractor scene in the dubbed version is merely icing on the cake. In general, this episode was very amusing, but in a good way. And rather than being irritating in this episode, Hercule is charming throughout, which is a huge plus. Another amusing moment that we all enjoyed within Dragon Ball Super was when 18 expressed her admiration for Krillin. I actually remember the moment in the cinema when she said, "He's so cool." In the cinema I was in, the audience just burst out laughing. I think that was a little bit unfair. I've said this in many videos before now that 18 marrying Krillin was the best thing she did in her life. She's got a complete life now. She's happy. She was previously destined to either wander the earth with her bro as a delinquent drifter, or to be a killing machine who would then grow bored and face inanity with an annoying brother. She did good actually, and still can kick butt, as we saw in the Tournament of Power. Please don't hold it against us because it's one of those short and sweet moments, and the Battle of Gods and Resurrection F was still considered Dragon Ball Z films. Yeah, back when we saw those plots. It's just something we like. However, we all know that it was the start of the Super era anyway, so don't hold it against us for including it. That whole thing is funny and endearing to watch her marvel at her husband getting things done, because she now has a sensible and level-headed attitude, but she still wants to make some bank. It's because we're so used to seeing memes about Krillin, it's likely that seeing someone genuinely praising his coolness and his consistency and loyalty made at least a few of us laugh. Again, a whole auditorium. However, we believe that since 2015, an increasing number of people have started to conclude that the Krill Dog is actually kind of awesome. Well, I mean, unless you're Toyotaro and decide to do him dirty in the manga on many occasions, but, we won't forget that, Toyotaro. So okay, what else was entertaining? Well, there was 17 being instructed on how one cannot simply stop another person's transformation sequence. Yes, this may seem to you the most meta thing to come out of Dragon Ball in recent years, but at least this came from a universe where the idea of showing off and heroics and meta humor were actually kind of prevalent. It made sense somewhat, and it was part of a joke. If this had been a Universe 7 person saying this would have been out of place and jarring if they had led the joke. Well played, Super. This has the potential to be one of the most hilarious scenes in the entire series, one of the most subversive ones too, now that the opportunity to play the joke had actually been met. And honestly, Android 17 concluded that the kamikaze fireballs from Universe 2 were especially vulnerable during their formation phase. He was only being smart and playing a team player. And since Toei is best known for its elaborate, long and recycled transformation sequence from Magical Girl series, it was standing to reason that they would like to poke fun at themselves sometimes. It's very rare for Toei to poke fun at themselves. So, yeah, they're doing something else, so why don't you just attack them, since they're wide open? To 17, it makes sense. Toppo, Ribrianne, and even Goku, to just spice things up, all interrupt him and lecture him about his behavior, that he has to remember about fighting etiquette within the dragon world. You gotta be inclusive, 17. We, as a fandom, are used to overly long transformation sequences in the magical girl genre, so at this point, we just assumed that this was more of a symbolic level and we just accepted that this was going to be a thing. And that time just kind of stood still in which to play out these intricate sequences. It's because we're so used to these kinds of transformations that this is a hilarious meta joke when it gets interrupted. And it's something we don't expect. As it turns out, not in this particular case where we're going to get the full thing. But yeah, to 17 this was a genuine mistake. It's abundantly clear that 17 has no idea what is going on, but Goku and Toppo appear to agree for once on the importance of allowing someone to do what they do best before then going in and dominating. Just let those fireballs do their thing, okay, 17? But what makes this moment so powerful is that not only our favourite androids in attention is there to the fore, but also the tournament's pause at this point. Everything stops. But are you aware of something that gives off even more trouble to the Dragon team? Those who mock Vegeta as a character. It's no secret that Vegeta is serious about his work. I am aware that most folk out there think that Haverock and I don't like Vegeta, because in many of our What If series, we tend to give him a hard time, rarely giving him the opportunity to excel until well into the end of the Z portion of the story and into the Super era of scenarios. However, I've got to remind you, he does that all to himself. The prince isn't a nice person at the beginning. He made the lives of the Dragon Team back then very difficult, and lots of things could have been avoided had he left well enough alone. We really do like Vegeta and the journey that he has undertaken since we first saw him in the Saiyan saga. He's the most complete character within the main Z Fighter group. He has had the most complete journey, in fact, out of anyone in Dragon Ball. But as a result, it was frequently amusing to put him in situations that were not in any ways life-threatening, or anything that he would even think of doing. One of them was Vegeta's aversion to fighting comical characters, which has remained consistent throughout both the Super Filler anime scene and the Neko Margin gag manga. It's very short, and if you can find it, I would give it a look. They frequently defy logic and reason, which makes the prince uncomfortable to even engage with them, let alone fight them, thinking that no matter what he does, or how much stronger he is than them, there will be something in their arsenal and their repertoire that will slip him up in a very dishonorable, disgraceful, and bizarre manner. The crossover episode between Dragon Ball and Dr. Slump contains some really good meta-humor amongst the Toriyama universe, and it is hilarious to see Vegeta simply refusing to interact with the comedic cast of Toriyama's other hit series, The Thing That Made Him a Millionaire. Despite the fact that many people unfamiliar with Dr. Slump disliked the crossover episode, there is actually some good humor in it, so you really should give it a chance. There is one more piece of Vegeta-related content, and you probably guessed it would be on this list. Bingo. Super Fun Time Bingo! Oh, that entire rendition that Vegeta made just to appease the likes of Beerus, who is utterly afraid of. Oh yes, let's hang out and have some fun, shall we? Yes, I like to do that. Please don't kill me, Beerus. This, in my opinion, really does require a lot of explanation. When everyone saw the scene for the first time, I believe they all struggled to process what they had just witnessed. Vegeta? Dancing? It's completely out of character, but it somehow works really well in the situation. The lengths that the prince would take to appease the cat. It goes to show how scared he was of the cat god at the time. This also reveals that Vegeta, in addition to his other hobbies of fighting, he does enjoy dancing in his spare time. Congratulations, Vegeta, that was truly impeccable. Then there was the bit where Frieza ends Paragus' life. Now, of course, we don't take mirth in a person's death, but it's more to do with what comes after said moment, the theatrics involved in it. With a few notable exceptions, such as when you're a psychotic and megalomaniacal space dictator, death is rarely amusing. Frieza has proven to be an insane wildcard since his second resurrection from the dead, stealing many scenes in an entertainingly twisted manner. After Resurrection F, Frieza has been used much better. Kikuno figuring out his master's wish and Frieza's playful banter with Berry Blue were highlights of the film Broly. The old Frieza would have never tolerated it. But there is nothing, I repeat nothing, that can compare to this scene. Ryusei Nakao and Chris Ayres, the voice actors for Frieza, the latter sadly dying before Superhero came out, both deliver outstanding performances. The scene completely glosses over Paragus' brutal and direct murder, so that Frieza can quickly go into a hyper-exaggerated reaction to enrage Broly, unleash his full potential, and get what the tyrant wants. This was done so that Frieza could quickly react in order to fully unleash Broly's potential. Despite being extremely dark on first viewing, it's hilarious in a way that only Frieza could pull off. But for now, we're done with these particular examples, but tune in next week as we're not yet done talking about Frieza. So go and tune into that video when it comes out.